We're talking with Dr. Robert Snyder, author of The Wicked Falls, Descent into the Maelstrom, and the Falls. Robert, R-O-B-Y-R-T, Snyder, SNYDER.com. Dr. Snyder, can you tell us a little bit about what the books are about?
Yeah, the books kind of look at Niagara Falls from a psychological perspective, and it's kind of relevant to what's going on now with the tightrope walk that's taking place on June 15th with Nick Wallenda. And it's all about that circus atmosphere that surrounds the stunting event. In my book, it's more a case of the a craft that is developed to go over Niagara Falls and take passengers with it. It's historical fiction. It has a lot of history in it. The reader will get a lot of history of Niagara Falls by reading this book. They'll get a lot of sense of the pulse of Niagara, and then because it's an imaginative situation, hypothetical, it will also make the reader think about what things that could happen in the future and what if this happened. And but basically the events are true. It's really the story of growing up in the shadow of Niagara Falls and what that was like. I was born in this area, I grew up in this area, and as kids we frequented this area. We know all the locations here, the Clifton Hill, the bridges over the Welland Canal, and the parks around the falls, and so we had a lot of stories, and the history of Niagara Falls is very exciting.
Dr. Snyder, could you tell us how you got the idea for the stories?
Well, we were on vacation one time. Of course, I had always grown up here, and we were visiting my parents. We used to come here every summer for vacation. And we were driving over the Rainbow Bridge, and my son actually asked me what was under the falls. And I thought about it for a minute, and I couldn't really give him an answer. And so I did some research on it, and the more I read, we used to come here every summer for vacation. And we were driving over the Rainbow Bridge, and my son actually asked me what was under the falls. And I thought about it for a minute, and I couldn't really give him an answer. And so I did some research on it, and the more I read, the more I saw that there were a lot of anomalies about this place. First of all, the Upper Rapids is a very dangerous physical feature. There have been people that have tried to go over Niagara Falls. I'm thinking specifically of one Red Hill, and he strapped together some inner tubes, and he was hoping to go over the falls that way. Well, the Upper Rapids kind of destroyed the strapping on the inner tubes, and he was basically delivered to the falls without any protection, and he died over the falls. And then you have the falls itself. The falls are about 17 stories high, and it's the greatest water flow of any waterfall in the world. There's more volume of water going over these falls. And that entails just the pressure of the water that can destroy you. Below the falls, the water density is much less thick, with all the air being infused into it, that a lot of people drowned underneath the falls, either from the pressure of the falls holding them under, or there's really no leverage against the water molecules down there, which is kind of unique, in a place like this. And there have been people that have gone over the falls and been trapped under there, either again from the water pressure or the lack of leverage, and they've suffocated under there, and some have been trapped under there for as much as 3 days. So that's another anomaly about this place. And then you have the plunge basin itself. Now, some people say the plunge basin itself is 2 to 3 times as deep as the height of the falls is. And because of all the water action and the danger, it's never really been surveyed. And so they've tried to send machines there, and some of the machines have been damaged, and so they've never really gotten a clear picture of what's underneath that of Niagara Falls. I think they know more actually about the surface of the moon than they do about what's under there. And as we go a little further along, the river actually convexes, which means it's forced through a narrow area that actually causes it to rise up in the center. Now that's something that you don't see in a lot of places, but the lower rapids, the Whirlpool Rapids, is a very dangerous place, and people have died in there. And then of course we have the water, the whirlpool itself. And you know, it's like a tornado underwater, and people have, you know, died in that area as well. So that was really the that really got me thinking about you know, what might be under there, and so that kind of gave me the idea of this book, I guess, is the answer to that. But just a couple other things. Niagara Falls is called the honeymoon capital of the world, and one of the reasons is because of all the water action that goes on here, and that produces a lot of negative ions. And negative ions actually make you feel better, so whether that has something to do with the feeling of being married and being on your honeymoon, but it is an attraction. On the other side, on the dark side, people have said that being here with the ions and watching the water can actually produce a hypnotic effect, and people have been known to stare at the water and say that it induces them to, excuse me, to jump over the falls, and so that's another aspect of this whole area.
So, Dr. Snyder, what similarities do you see with your books and the upcoming Wire Walk by Nick Wallenda on June 15th?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, but it really is kind of eerie. The whole television coverage that's being announced, the traffic, the whole influx of spectators, all this was, I had written about this in the book, and that book was originally released in 2006. But I was here a couple of weeks ago, and the whole vibe of the area, it's almost like everything that's been written about is coming true. The atmosphere, the whole circus kind of environment that is developing here is just, it's almost like I wrote about it years ago, and now it seems to be taking place.
Well, Dr. Snyder, what about the fact that the hypothetical stunt in the book doesn't end favorably?
Well, that's a tough question to get into, and I don't really, you know, I don't want to wish ill will on anybody, and I kind of don't want to give away the end of the story either, but there is a dark side to Niagara Falls here, and it kind of sets it apart from other venues. We all kind of know the history of Niagara Falls was a place for human sacrifices, the Iroquois. Everybody has that image of sending a maiden over in a canoe filled with flowers to the brink of the falls, and that may or may not happen in that fashion, but we certainly know there were human sacrifices here. The Christians, it was interesting that Niagara Falls was actually discovered, well, actually first documented by a Jesuit priest, Father Louis Hennepin, and the Christians always viewed this as a creation of God, kind of the intersection of the physical and spiritual worlds. And many people compare it to, say, the Grand Canyon, another vast physical feature that many feel had the hand of God in it. One thing I noticed, and I've been to both places, is that at the Grand Canyon, it does seem like God has wrought his work there, but it almost seems like now he's left. It's a very serene place, it's a very vast place, and no question about it, when you're there you feel it's almost life-changing. But here at Niagara, the feeling is that there's a lot more energy here. It's almost like a work in progress. The water action has carved out a lot of the features here, and it's almost like God is still here. And so if you have that presence here, you don't want to be doing anything detrimental to go against whatever the powers be, whether it be from a spiritual Indian perspective. But a lot of people do, unfortunately, again, this is the dark side, a lot of people do come here to commit suicide. I know that this is a fact that's most of the venues around the falls here will try and keep under wraps, but 4 to 5 people sometimes a week will commit suicide here. And so that's kind of the dichotomy of the place, that you have this place that's so beautiful, and yet on the other side that it's so dangerous and deadly as well.
Dr. Snyder, are you proposing that because Niagara is unique, it will play a role in the Wallenda Wire Walk?
Well, again, going back to the comparison of the Grand Canyon, I've always maintained that Niagara is not a passive place. In fact, I've always viewed this as a relentless place. If you read the book, I actually have the term, can you feel it coming? C-U-F-I-C. And those initials, that's what that stands for, can you feel it coming? And that refers to the falls, the fact that the falls is almost very aggressive. It's almost like a hunter coming to get you. And I can cite a couple examples for that. Many years ago, there was this worker named Samuel Avery who was being ferried to the shore after doing some work out on the river or at some location, and his boat turned over. He actually made it to the shore by swimming or by the drift of the current, where he hung onto a root, and he had to stay in that position all night long with the current surging at him. Nobody could reach him in the darkness. The root could have broken at any time, or he could have got tired, or he could have suffered from hypothermia, but he held on to that root all night long, defying the falls. In the morning, rescuers threaded a boat down the shore to him, which he actually got in, and he thought he was saved. Everybody thought he was saved. They were bringing him ashore, and then all of a sudden some strange wave hit the boat again and knocked him out of the boat. And so after battling all night long, he was back in the water, and this time he kind of threw his hands up in despair, and that's the way he went over the falls to his death. So that kind of illustrates the relentlessness of this river, and in my opinion, that's really the epitome of wicked. And we have one other example, was the Hermit of Niagara. I believe this was around 1859. There was a man that came around the falls here, and at that time they had what was called Terrapin Tower, and they built this structure on a rock base right at almost the brink of the falls, and people could go over to that tower and get, I mean, it must have been the view of a lifetime, looking over and seeing the falls. There was also, extended from that, there was this plank, a 4x8 piece of board, and then there was a boardwalk that led out to it. Well, after the tourists were gone for the day, which was very dangerous to walk out there in the first place, but the Hermit of Niagara used to kind of hang out there at night. And so he would go out on that board, and he would be seen sometimes sleeping on the board, laying on it, doing tricks, doing handstands. It was almost like he was performing tricks, or some say he was taunting the falls or taunting the powers that be here. And he did that for a couple of years, and then one day they found his body all ravaged and damaged below the falls, and it was almost as if the powers that reside here kind of got tired of the taunting, and so they kind of put an end to it.
It seems like you're making a connection between a spiritual power and the falls.
Yeah, well, many believe, as I said, that the falls is still evolving and that it was created by a powerful hand. So by the extension of that, if the falls is still a work in progress, then that means that the presence is still here and it still resides here. And so therefore, the argument would be that if you challenge the falls, you're challenging the entity behind it. And it's again, the falls could be very predatory. I would liken it to the story of Moby Dick. Now, Captain Ahab in Moby Dick, he had his vengeance against the great white whale, Moby Dick, but he was really indirectly challenging God, or directly challenging God, because Moby Dick was a creation of God. And so by carrying out his vengeance against Moby Dick, that vengeance was extended to God, and we all know how that turned out for the crew of the Pequod. And cut.
So, Dr. Snyder, is Wallenda challenging God?
Well, again, using the Ahab example, indirectly, I would say yes, but whether he is directly, I'm not really sure whether he is a religious person or not. But one thing I do know is the presence here does not like flaunting. And as I was doing some research with the Christian religion, one of the 7 deadly sins is the sin of pride and vainglory, is the way they refer to it. And pride and vainglory is probably the greatest of these sins, where all the other sins stem from that. And so I'm not going to be the judge, and there are other elements that are going to do that, but I would say that there's never been a live telecast of a stunting event here at Niagara Falls. This appears that it's going to be the first of its kind, and I would just say this, that if you're going to do a live television stunt promotion in front of a national audience, that might be the epitome of vainglory.